haven't met me yet, I'm Martha Hill Duncan, and I'm from Kingston, Ontario. And I'm going to be talking today about notation. I'm a composer and a teacher, and I'm a new grandmother. I have a first grandmother. And you can bet she's going to be composing at the age of 12 months. Anyway, I want to talk about notation with a little bit of musicianship involved in that. And I'm hoping that we're kind of continuing the idea going along here of writing out our ideas. And I would say this is an original handwritten score of Mozart. And I'm trying to spread it out a little bit so you can see it. And scooch up. Don't worry about coming up and sitting. There's a whole lot of chairs here. If you can't see, I'm going to have lots of scores up on here, so use the space if you're interested. And I just want to show everything kind of leans over to the left, so I don't know if he was just giving himself ideas or if it's the sketch for a complete piece. But if you'll notice, he's got stems going on the wrong side. I don't think anybody told him, that he should have been moving those around. And also, he starts out in B flat major, goes to A major with a flip of a key signature here. It is not in the correct order, I must say. And also, he goes into, looks like C minor or A minor, E flat major, and then flips it over to D major. I do not know what he was thinking, but obviously his scores don't look like that. I think it's a sketch. It looks like Allemande, I can't read that, Andante, and then something else there. So anyway, yes?
Sorry, the second one is the clarinet.
Oh, can you read that CL there?
Yeah.
You see it? Yeah, okay, there you go. Okay, and then the next one, we've got Beethoven's original score of the Moonlight Sonata. If I went to the music store and bought that score, I'd say, there's no way in heck I'll ever be able to play that. I'm sorry. What are you saying here? So, that creative spirit is not perfect when it comes to notating. It's such an art to notating. And for me, the first time I realized that notation and writing out my ideas, I love to improvise, I love to make up things as a child. And at 8 years old, my music teacher handed me one of those little manuscript books and said, write it out. And I went home and I wrote it out, and I came back. She put it up on the music stand at the piano, at her white grand piano, and she played it, and it sounded pretty close to what I had been playing. And for me, it was like treasure map. I thought, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. To be able to freeze for eternity that, musical, emotional feel I had onto paper so that anybody else could grab it, 200 years later and still find it. It was just fascinating. So I love talking about notation. I'm always trying to make it better, easier, clearer, so nobody will be scared of my scores, and they'll get to the heart of the music and not just say, whoop, that was too hard. Because my music is hard. I'm a contemporary composer. I'm not always in C major. And so there are other ways I have to, invite people into my musical world. This fellow is Robert Moran, and he's actually,
so beautiful,
isn't it? It's
on my wall.
It's a composition, and I think it's called Within a Day. It was performed in 2014. He's 77 years old. It was performed in San Francisco, and if any of you know about Lou Harrison, it was an avant-garde kind of San Francisco group that did kind of crazy stuff. And he says this is for homemade instruments, Asian instruments, and he feels like he is more of a choreographer in this composition than an actual, note-to-note composer. So imagine what's going on here. I can't even think. But if we had lots of time and lots of instruments, we just might try it and see. It looks to me like it's moving that way. Okay, and then this is my little piece for a beginner piano who's never read anything, and it's more illustrative. And I just started to do this because I understand there are a lot of teachers who don't start with notes first. And I'm a Suzuki teacher with a traditional blend. And so the idea of illustrative scores was kind of crazy to me. But I would go and do you know, guest visits at different places, and they said, Martha, you have so much elementary to advanced, but we need beginners, somebody that can play a piece in 2 weeks. You know, can you know, start a lesson in September and see you in October and have a piece ready to play. And so this was like crazy. All of a sudden I'm trying to, you know, make pieces that are interesting, put them on a piece of paper so that a person can look at it and play along with it. And so here you don't even have notes. You just say, well, here's the piano. You're going to put 2, 3, 4 on this black key, left hand 4, 3, 2, and hopefully they can read, because they can at least sing the words. So that's a different kind of score for me. And then the other thing about scores is that people work so hard to make these beautiful pieces, and they give them lousy titles. Black and white. White number 1. Slow number 2. So the great music titles that I love, you can probably come up with some songs without words. What a creative title. Of course, Debussy's Clair de Lune, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, although I don't know if that's what his terminology was. One of my favorites, Rhapsody in Blue. How could that be better? Seeds from Childhood. That's Schumann's, and I Love for Elise. And what a great title. And then Paul Scheffel's is Not for Elise. You can imagine how that would go. And then we have a title by John Cage, which is simply the Oopsie Daisy. Oopsie Daisy. Is simply the time of the piece. And this piece, 4 minutes, 33 seconds, the performer sits down at the piano, and the movements, he just sits there, it's complete silence, and he sits there, and he pulls the fallboard down to indicate different movements. So he'll sit for time, and he'll pull. So, you know, I'd love to see that score. I don't know what that score looks like. And then this one is really cool. Einstein on the Beach. Einstein on the Beach, what's that? By Philip Glass. Rimsky-Korsakov's Flight of the Bumblebee. And Michael Nyman, who does a lot of film music, The Heart Asks Pleasure First. So just great titles. So it's like going through 9 months of labor, having a baby, and naming him or her Junior. You know, come up with something special, you know, this great work, and then you come up with some, you know, ridiculous title. And, you know, for me that's important because the title gives me an indication of the mood or the, you know, the picture I'm trying to create, the sound. But maybe you like the idea of being completely non-emotive, and you like just a very plain title that just lists it, number 1, number 2. Symphony number 6, you know, I that's not me. So it's personal, right? And then the next thing when we're doing our compositions, is it going to be, I say, to key or not to key? That is the question. For me, I do a lot of contemporary music that has non-traditional scales, and so my first question would be, well, is the music major or minor? So that would tell me, you know, what I created. Does it feel better in sharps or flats? You know, sometimes you think, well, you start writing sharps in and you realize, well, actually, it feels more like flats. My number 3 question would be, would transposing to a simpler key be better? And oftentimes, my ear works with many black keys, and I'm trying to write for a more elementary level, and then just transposing it to an easier key. It's like, wow. You know, and then you can get some different things to come up. Okay, no, we don't want that. Whatever that is, we don't want that. Cancel, right? Okay. And then, then my next question would be, is there more than one key? And with my writing, certainly, I find myself in a lot of keys. And then number 5, should there be a key at all? And for me, if there's lots of accidentals, please don't give me a key. Just you know, mark the accidentals as best you can. And the final question, should treble and bass clefs have different keys? And this one, that's the case. This is my pentangle, and the left hand is black keys, and the right hand is, hold on, I can get there, white keys. Off, you can see that then the right hand goes into, yeah, I can do this. The right hand, oops. I can do it, I can do it. Then you see it here, I switch at the end. The right hand flips to sharps.
That's fun today.
So I'm not thinking how I'm going to write it when I am designing the piece. For me, it's like a physical expression on the piano, or I have some great ideas. I figure out the notation usually later, and I try to, it's not always, it doesn't always come clearly right away. And also my first attempt is not always necessarily the right one. So I have to be open-minded and know that I'm going to need some time to make sure that I get just the right look. And this is how my notation looks when I use an Apple Pencil on my iPad in the back. You know, when I'm trying to write my talk before Friday morning. Okay, so this title, Time Signatures, Finding Beat 1. What I find in a lot of compositions when I do adjudicating for composition competitions across Canada is a lot of kids have great ideas, but they don't realize that there should be a main beat. And so they say, well, I have 72 notes in this piece, I'm going to divide it by 4, so it will be a 4/4. Not keeping in mind that, you know, beat 1 or that feeling of arrival is not always, you know, exactly at that right time. So for instance, if we sing Twinkle, Twinkle in 4, twinkle, okay, we sing Twinkle, Twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. It feels right, it feels just right. Then we try it in 3/4, and I'm going to really screw this up. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, I wonder what you... It's all crazy. Or if you did it in 6/8, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder... Anyway, so we need to be in touch enough with our music to know when it feels like it's on beat 1, when it feels like it's an upbeat, and so then it makes more sense. So when you see meter changes of 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, and you say, why would the composer do that? Why do you make it so hard? It's because beat 1 is on now, and then 1, 2, 3. Then it's on beat 1 is on the 4th beat, which would be 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It really does make sense because we're feeling beat 1, and that means we have to change the time signature. It's not just because we want to make it look hard or scare potential performers. Okay, and then sometimes we have to decide, is it going to be on 1 staff, 2 staffs, or 3 staffs? Now this piece I originally wrote, it's called Santa and the Winds, and it's from a stay that I had in California in Isla Vista near University of Santa Barbara. When I first wrote it out, it was in 2 staffs. But if you'll see, you've got a down stem here, left hand, the upstems are the right hand. It's so much easier to read. It's a grade 9 piece on the Royal Conservatory list, but it's so simple because you just have that right hand following, the left hand following the right hand, and you can see it because they're so close together on the, I can do this on the screen. Here we go. So you. My downbeats too. So you've got first one's in 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it makes sense. I wouldn't do it in 4 because you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. It completely messes it up. So it's not to make it hard, it's to make it exciting and try to get my musical ideas into notation. So easy to do it on 1 staff. With 2 staffs it looked terribly difficult. And the only reason that I even thought of 1 staff is when it went to be published, the editor wrote back and he says, You thought of one staff? No, I didn't think of one staff. And it's perfect. Okay. And then the next.